So in case you're not aware, there's going to be a new Avatar show coming out. It's going to be a live-action remake on Netflix, which is great. But don't worry, it's Avatar. They could never mess up Avatar. Honestly, I'm not actually super concerned with the quality of the new Avatar remake. Netflix has put out some bad shows, some really bad live-action remakes. Like, they've also put out some bangers, too. A lot of innovative, a lot of inventive, imaginative shows, movies. And even their live-action stuff has started to get better. Their live-action One Piece was actually pretty good. And even though I haven't seen it, I have heard good things about their live-action Yu Yu Hakusho show. So I think it could work out. Now, there is some reason to be concerned about a live-action remake because we've already had one. Way back when, I think in 2010, 2008, something like that, we had the live-action Avatar movie, directed by M. Night Shyamalan, but it wasn't called Avatar. It was called The Last Airbender. Avatar was something else, and now it's kind of annoying when you say, hey, I f***ing love Avatar, and people are like, oh, you mean the blue people? No, I mean the show that actually has creative storytelling. But anyway, I'm not talking about that. We're talking about Avatar. When The Last Airbender came out, I was actually really excited for it. As a kid, I didn't really appreciate animation the way it should be appreciated. Nowadays, I know how difficult it is, how time-consuming, and I know that there are just things animators can do that you can't do in live action. Just, you can't. But I didn't have that appreciation as a kid. So when I saw the live-action Avatar movie, when I saw the live-action The Last Airbender, I was excited. I liked it. Well, I enjoyed it. It was okay. See, to me, it didn't matter the quality of the movie. I liked it because it was Avatar, and because it was live action. Because, to me, live action was adult, and now there was an adult version of Avatar, which was cool. But as I got older, I started to realize why I only just kind of enjoyed it. It was a mess, even by just normal standards, not even by remake standards. It made a lot of weird decisions that it tried really hard to justify, that it never had to justify because it never had to make those decisions. It had weird writing, weird direction, weird acting, and I'm honestly not going to blame the actors because most of them were kids, and M. Night Shyamalan is a professional director who should know how to professionally direct all kinds of people, including, or especially, child actors, considering he's gotten amazing performances out of them in the past. I'm getting off track. The Last Airbender was bad, plain and simple, but I don't think it's really fair to compare that to this new remake. I think any remake could work, and I think any remake should try to change things, to try to differentiate itself from the original. Because I think instead of trying to remake the original one-to-one in a new live-action format, it should try to change things in a way that it can add to it, to be an extension of Avatar. That way we can still enjoy the old show while also enjoying the new show. But obviously, if they make it bad, well, we're just not going to enjoy the new show. And honestly, if they don't change anything from the original, I'm just going to prefer the original because it's just that good. But since the remake isn't out yet, I'm not going to focus on that. Instead, let's talk about Avatar: The Last Airbender. Now, one of the issues that comes up with any Avatar remake is that Avatar is really f***ing good. Now, how's that a drawback? Well, it gives us a frame of reference. It shows us what has changed and what hasn't, and it shows us what is missing that needs to be there, that should be there. The first time I watched Avatar all the way through was when I was in college. Like I said, I enjoyed it as a kid, but I was also a f***ing idiot, and I never really tried to remember when new episodes came out. So, I never finished the show until I was in college, and after I watched it once, I watched it a few more times. This time, my rewatch happened to coincide with the first trailer of the live-action Avatar, and it got me starting to notice just how much the show does. Like, I never really realized before exactly why I liked the show so much. I just liked it, and I thought it was obviously, the worlds, the characters, but nothing specific. And after watching the trailer, I started to notice even more from the show than I had ever noticed before. For one thing, the animation. The animation style really adds to Avatar. Now, Avatar kind of came out at the perfect time. You see, it's an American animated show, but it takes a lot of influence from Japanese anime. And at the time, there was actually a surprising number of American animated shows that were doing the same thing. You had shows like Teen Titans, The Boondocks, Samurai Jack, Hi Hi Puffy Amiyumi, and the list goes on. All these shows were pretty popular at the time, and while the animation style is not the sole reason for these shows' popularity, it is a pretty big contributing factor. None of these shows would be the same without this animation style. Just look at Teen Titans Go. And Avatar is no exception. The animation in the show makes the characters expressive, it makes the bending kinetic and exciting, and it makes the old guys f***ing jacked. It's actually really hard to imagine the show without this style. When you see people earthbending, it feels powerful and strong. When you see Aang airbending, it feels like he's light enough to float on air, and it's all because of the animation. animation. And it doesn't just contribute to the fighting either. It makes the show funnier. Like, it's kind of surprising to think about it because it's a kids animated TV show from Nickelodeon from 2005, but it's actually really funny even today.
He's an earthbender, right? Rocky! You know, because of all the rocks.
We're gonna keep trying, but that is a good backup.
Obviously, most of that has to do with the writing. You know, it's a lot of funny lines, funny interactions. It also has to do with the animation, because while the animation does give us exciting fight scenes and cool bending techniques, it also gives us
Drink cactus juice.
Let's talk about the fighting for a second. Now, the fighting in this show, especially compared to other kids shows, I feel, is something that's really different. The fighting isn't just there to keep us engaged, it also shows us who the characters are and how they evolve and change over the course of the show. Let's take Aang and Zuko for example. They probably fight more than anybody else on the show. I have no proof of that, so don't prove me wrong. When we see them fighting, we see Zuko steadily pursuing Aang because that's his sole focus. He gets tunnel vision and sees nothing else. When we see Aang fighting, we see him basically just try not to kick everyone's ass. He's a pacifist and he doesn't want to fight, so he just focuses on disarming and outmaneuvering his enemies, until obviously he can't do that anymore. Now, Zuko throughout season 1 kind of stays the same. He really just pursues Aang until he can't, and at some point he really can't because he's wanted. That's after season 1. One problem that is pointed out to him by Uncle Iroh is that he never thinks about his next move, and that's something that Zuko desperately needs to learn. He needs to learn that he can't just fight. He needs to prepare for when things don't work out, because he never plans ahead. And he also needs to plan ahead, obviously. Now, Iroh points this out to Zuko, and Zuko at first does grasp this. He realizes that he needs a change. Problem is, they are shortly after wanted criminals, so that kind of gets in the way. But after everyone gangs up on Azula, Iroh decides to continue Zuko's training, and he teaches Zuko that the 4 elements are not really separate, they are all a part of one whole, and that Zuko needs to draw wisdom from more than one place if he is to really improve. And right away we do see Zuko learning this because he learns how to redirect lightning, which is based off of waterbending. But more than that, we do see Zuko actually use other waterbending techniques in his fighting. And he's not the only one. When Katara fights Hama, we see her using earthbending techniques just like Toph was teaching Aang. And in the sequel show, Legend of Korra, we actually see Toph using some waterbending techniques. So here we see all the characters learning and growing and changing just through the way they fight. And everything culminates at the end of the show. And it's really fulfilling to see where these characters started from and comparing them to where they are at the end. We see Aang grow from a childish airbender who never wanted to be the Avatar into a fully realized Avatar who fulfills his destiny and ends the 100-Year War. We see Sokka go from being the only person able to defend his tribe to someone who is able to lead, to someone who is able, how do I phrase this? To someone who is able to lead his friends onto a fleet of airships that he helped invent, by the way, and take them down from the inside. We see Toph go from a lone earthbending wrestler person to somebody who cares about and fights for her friends. And she can metal bend. And nobody freaks out about it, and I don't f***ing know why.
What is that? What the f*** is that? Oh my god!
And best of all, we see Katara grow from a shy girl in the water tribe who barely knows how to bend into a total f***ing badass who takes down Azula. And I want to take a second to talk about Zuko and Azula, because their story at the end is one of the more compelling ones. Throughout the show, we see how Zuko and Azula grew up. Obviously, their father, Fire Lord Ozai, is a piece of shit. And at first, it seems like Zuko got the raw end of the deal. Azula is the favorite, and she's always treated better than Zuko. But by the end, we start to see that while Azula was treated differently, it wasn't necessarily better for her. Her father taught her that only fear will inspire loyalty. And towards the end of the show, we see the people who were loyal to her out of fear start to fear her less. And she starts to realize that she doesn't actually have a good way of keeping people around, of keeping people loyal to her, because nobody wants to be loyal to her. She starts losing everybody around her because she knows that they are not truly loyal to her. So it's only a matter of time before they betray her. And then Zuko shows up and he challenges her to the throne. And this leads to honestly one of the best fight scenes in the entire show. Zuko and Azula are fighting in an Agni Kai, which is basically a firebending duel. Now, for every other Agni Kai, and for that matter, for every other firebending battle, it's always been exciting and energetic. But in this fight, everything cuts out. It's somber, it's melancholic. This isn't a battle between good and evil. This is a brother and a sister fighting each other because they don't really have another choice. Both of them are starting to feel the different sides of their father's abuses. And at the end, Zuko wins because he realized what kind of person his father was. And Azula loses herself, and she ends up scared, sad, and alone. And as crazy as she might have been, as much as they might have hated each other, neither of them wanted it to end like this. It's just a very engaging story, and something that I never would have expected from a Nickelodeon TV show. Now, the most important part of Avatar is by far the characters. The characters in the show are some of the deepest and most realistic portrayals compared to most kids shows. Yeah, we get cartoon humor. Yeah, Sokka jokes around a lot, but we also see them struggle with things that are honestly fair. Sokka starts to struggle with the fact that he can't bend and he's not as powerful as his friends. And as a reaction, his friends band together and help him through this. Even though they kind of have a lot of other things going on at the time. Zuko and Iroh are characters that start out on the evil side, but even from the beginning, we kind of start to see how good they actually are. They're not just evil to be evil, they're complicated, just like everyone else. And as the show advances, we don't see them just suddenly flip sides, we see them struggle and we see them change. They get banished from the Fire Nation and they're on the run because everyone else hates people from the Fire Nation. They have to hide, they have to struggle, and they have to lie about who they are. And even when Zuko finally sees the light, it's not immediate and it's not necessarily lasting. He still struggles, because that's how his father taught him to be, and he still doesn't completely accept that his father's a bad person. And even after he has fully grasped what kind of person he's been and what kind of a person his father is, the people that he approaches to try to help reject him, which is fair. They aren't just kind because forgiveness is what's most important. They don't trust Zuko, because he is an asshole. One of my favorite episodes of basically anything is Tales of Ba Sing Se. This is an episode in Season 2 that takes place during kind of a downtime. Everybody is in Ba Sing Se basically waiting for something to happen. Aang and his friends can't really move because they need to find Appa, and Zuko and Iroh are trying to make a life there. And in this episode, we really see parts of people that we don't see anywhere else. What do I mean by this? I mean we see how these characters hide parts of themselves, even from the people they love. Now in this episode, Aang and Sokka pretty much get into shenanigans that we would expect from them. So let's get them out of the way first. Aang gets a relatively interesting story in this, for what it is at least. We see Aang go to a zoo that's been neglected because they can't get supplies, they don't have resources, they don't have money, so the zoo and these animals are really struggling. So Aang decides to make a new zoo by going outside the walls and building it, basically by hand. Well, he's an earthbender, but, by hand. And it's nice to see during this time of struggle, Aang still trying to help people in ways that nobody else will. Especially because a few episodes before this, we see Aang struggle to be hopeful and helpful because of what's happened to Appa. So it's just nice to see Aang acting like himself, even though the problem itself is not fixed. Sokka's episode in terms of writing is actually kind of amazing to me. See, Sokka finds himself getting shoved into a window. That's just how it starts. He ends up in a haiku class, poetry class. I'm assuming it's a poetry class. I don't think they would just teach haikus. Maybe they do. I don't know how haikus work. For those who don't know, or for those who can't remember from English class, a haiku is a type of poem where the first line has 5 syllables, the second line has 7 syllables, and the third line has 5 syllables, and that's the entire thing. I never really understood haikus, but I get the concept. I could never make a good one, nor could I recognize one out in the wild, but I do recognize just how difficult it must have been to make this section of the episode. See, Sokka, in order to stay in this class, has to keep speaking in haikus. Doesn't make sense, it's a f***ing cartoon. And so we see him basically getting into this haiku battle with the teacher, and all the girls love it, which obviously entices Sokka to keep going. So he does, until the very end, where his last line has one too many syllables, and he gets kicked out by the guard.
That's one too many syllables there, bub.
Throughout the show, Katara and Toph aren't really seen doing much as friends. Now, of course, they are friends. The whole gang is friends. Is friends? Are friends? I don't know. But we never really see Katara and Toph hanging out together alone by themselves. So their story sees them go to a spa where they get pampered and they hang out together, laugh, joke, and have fun. Now, Toph can't actually see how she looks because of the whole blind thing. So she never usually cares about how she looks, but she does admit that it does feel nice to be pretty. And we see that despite the fact that she doesn't care about how she looks, it still hurts her when people make fun of her for how she looks. And it's kind of nice to see that Toph, who is always so tough and stoic, can still be cheered up by her friend calling her pretty. And then they commit murder, so good for them. Momo throughout the show is basically a gag character. He doesn't really do much, he doesn't really Well, he doesn't say anything.
You, my friend, are just a few plums short of a fruit pie.
He doesn't really do much, he doesn't really say much aside from this one moment, but he's always fun to see. In this episode, we get to see him in a new light. We get to see that Momo actually misses Appa. In this story, Momo basically spends his night looking for Appa. He wakes up from a dream where he heard Appa screaming and realizes that maybe Appa was actually screaming and it wasn't actually a dream. He starts chasing down clouds and bushes that look like Appa, and he starts chasing any lead that he gets, and he even carries around a tuft of fur from Appa that he finds from a bush. Eventually, after all this running around in the city, he does get caught by someone who intends to murder him, but he escapes because he's smart. And in an act of goodwill, he does release these puma bat things. I don't actually know what they are. They're black, they can fly. I don't know. And in response, the puma bat things steal his tuft of fur. At first, it seems like they're just being dicks, but then they lay it down in Appa's footprints, and we see Momo holding Appa's tuft of fur, laying in his footprints and closing his eyes after a long night. Now, Zuko's story starts out with peak paranoid Zuko telling his uncle that a cute young girl is a spy. Iroh, being a bit smarter and, let's be honest, a bit less traumatized than Zuko, lets him know that she's probably there because she thinks Zuko is cute, which is fair. I think we all think that. And she ends up asking Zuko out on a date, and we get to see Uncle Iroh excited to send his nephew on a date. And on this date, we get to see a side of Zuko that we don't normally see. He's shy, he's nervous, and he tries to let his guard down. But most notably, he risks getting caught firebending just to see her smile. And even though it ends kind of poorly because he has a lot of baggage, let's be honest, when he gets home, it seems like he's just gonna act like he usually does. But then we actually see him be honest.
It was nice.
Iroh's story is honestly my favorites. We see Iroh simply getting ready for a picnic. He's out on the town, he's excited, he's happy, and throughout his day we see him stopping whatever he's doing just to try to help wherever he can. He sings to a crying boy to help cheer him up. When a man tries to rob him, Iroh sits down with him, makes him tea, and encourages the man to choose a better path for himself. And this is where he says one of my favorite lines from the show.
While it is always best to believe in oneself, a little help from others can be a great blessing.
This is something that a lot of shows, not even just kid shows, but a lot of shows in general, just kind of gloss over. Conceptually, yeah, it's easy to believe in yourself, and that is what is most important, but it gets hard to believe in yourself when it seems like nobody else does. And at the end of the day, we see Iroh sit by a tree, set up his picnic, and celebrate his son's birthday. Iroh is one of the most supportive and encouraging characters ever, really, and here we see how much he regrets not being able to help his son the way he tries to help everyone else. It's a beautiful story, and it's a touching dedication for the man who portrayed him throughout the show. Avatar is special because it never feels like this huge thing. It's a story about a 100-year war that's going to change the world regardless of the outcome, but it never detracts from the characters. It always stays with them. It always shows us their struggles and not the overall struggle in the war. A lot of shows and movies these days try to show us these huge conflicts with world-shattering consequences, but Avatar still remains one of the best shows I've ever seen because it's not about the 100-year war. It's about Aang trying to be who he needs to be. It's about Zuko starting to realize who he should be. It's about Katara and Sokka and Toph all learning and growing together. Obviously, any remake for Avatar is going to make changes, but one thing that absolutely needs to stay the same is this. Avatar has never been about the war. It has always been a show about Iroh having tea with people he's never met before just because he wants to get to know them.
Sharing tea with a fascinating stranger is one of life's true delights.
Anyway, thank you for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe if you want to. If you don't, maybe reconsider. And I hope I'll see you in the next one. Thank you much.